All right, I'm going to talk on flax for rock hard cataracts, whether it's a boon or a gimmick. Flax, as we know, it's a matter of understanding a few tips and tricks, mainly, as one would say, centered around nuclear assembly. It all depends on how you can break the nucleus down utilizing the laser and how you can manage to do your work. If you can master that, then flax is the answer. Let us first understand where lie the basic differences to comprehend the shift from standard phaco to flax for hard brown cataracts. Dr. Haldipurkar just earlier had mentioned in his talk, and where the others had also mentioned that it is the cost of the flax which is holding it back, which is true. The cost is a crippling blow as far as the flax is concerned in a country where the cost of a cataract surgery is less than the cost of just using a flax. Capsulotomy on a rock hard cataract is a real advantage. There's no question about it. You can manage much more easier. Why? Because you can get an absolutely circular opening. In a rock hard cataract, what is our problem? Our problem is that if you cannot get a perfectly sized capsulotomy, the ability to then do the hard cataract is compromised because the capsule will tear up to the periphery and lead to probably a drop nucleus. So if you can do a perfectly well-centered 5.2 diameter opening, half the battle with a hard cataract is won. Nuclear disassembly is one of the main benefits of flax. It allows you to customize for the patient's lens density. With a more mature cataract, you have a smaller cube design. You use a cube, but we have now literally gone on to using a circular, a cruciate chop design for almost all our patients, and then use additional cube quadrants. One big advantage of flax is that you have real-time images running. You can not only soften the lens and break it into little bits, you can even do your incisions in advance. You can do your arcuate keratotomy. And the big advantage is that you can do that comparatively easily with minimal risk to the eye. Understanding the basic difference from a routine technique, you need to make it more efficient. You have to remember the difference between flax is basically what we call as nuclear disassembly. Imagine you're rock climbing. You reach up to the next level. You're grabbing onto gravel instead of solid rock and you keep pulling gravel off. You never get a handhold to put yourself up. If you anticipate that, you need to convert onto venturi. A flax unit is designed for usage by venturi, not by peristaltic. Then the pieces are always coming towards you and you are controlling the vacuum. So you have to learn to use a venturi system in your phacoemulsification system. The most important step in flax is to split the lens into two. You can try viscoelastic in the center soft segment, a technique we call as endolenticular viscoelastic dissection. But if that does not work, then you can use two instruments. But it's often much more easier after the splits are made utilizing a femto. I'm going to show you all this a little later on, and then take it out. An important thing to remember is a few words which we don't normally utilize with anterior segment surgery. One of them is fimbrications. Fimbrications is the cortex are present and are generally loose and easy to grab following a regular phaco. However, due to a perfect capsulotomy and an anterior, one would call it as a cortexotomy made by the laser, these fimbrications are lost, hence making identification is a little more difficult. So the funny thing is, the phaco part is easier. The removing the cortex in a flax is comparatively more difficult. You get a very good advantage when you're implanting a trifocal lens because it gives you a perfect centration. Though the fact is there that a trifocal lens fits into a bag and the bag is quite different to where your pupil lies, but you still remember that what causes decentering of your lens later on is an irregular contraction of the capsular bag. If the capsular bag contracts regularly, then you do not get a decentered pupil, which means essentially that you can get away comparatively easily. Let's now take a series of cases one by one so we know what is happening. sound so you can hear me talk instead. Now, one of the things which you need to do with flax, on the first case, I'm going to talk a little about how we set the machine. In the subsequent cases, we're just going to take the cataracts as they are. You pupil maximize the pupillary size. The machine does most of the work for yourself. Subsequently, the surgery part is comparatively rapid. It only takes seconds to do it and really not a hassle. Very often we don't tend to include arcuate cuts or even the openings because making the openings or reopening the openings often takes longer than just doing it. Now here is a case where we have done that. We have used multiple softened parts. It's a hard brown cataract as you know it. What we first do here is a little different to what we do. We first hydrate a little and then rotate the lens utilizing the same hydrating technique. So you soften up the adhesions in the back. And when you soften the adhesions in the back, then it's only a question of aspiration. More often than not, the aspiration is rapid enough just to get rid of the fragments. If you need to use phaco, it is minimal. You need to cut it down to about 20% phaco or 15% phaco. Usually that's enough. Once again, you have to be careful to make sure your lens goes into the bag because the edges of the bag often are not very clearly seen purely because you have got a perfect cut on the edge. On the other hand, I use a technique which is a little different to the others. I do stain my capsules as a routine when I'm starting because then it shows me where the capsular edge is. So I always can be sure of getting it. Let me take another hard brown cataract. Notice I've made only vertical cuts, but all I need to do is pull it down and it splits easily into fragments. The fragments are simple enough to then aspirate and remove without any difficulty. So remember, if you're doing flax or you learn to do flax, rotate the nucleus so it doesn't remain adherent and then you move it out. Those little bits which you saw a little earlier, show it to you again, once again. The little bits which you see at the side of the capsule is what we call, these are called as fimbrications. And these need to be removed carefully because these are left over inside. And then of course you can implant your lens in. This is a Zeiss trifocal, which you are putting inside. It's a great lens. It works very well, gives good results there. And but you have to be certain that all four legs of the implant go in and it is centered perfectly. Let's take now one more cataract. Again, now it's a white cataract, but it's a hard white cataract. Now, what you need to do in this cataract essentially is the same. When we make the vertical cuts, then the cuts are limited to 8 or 6. Notice the limited number of cuts. Rotate it down, and then all you have to do is to fragment the chip and remove one piece. Once one piece comes off, everything else fragments and dissolves into little bits. So you just have to open that one. It's like opening the key to a door. You open it and then everything just opens out. You only need to use a little bit of aspiration and, as I said, minimum phaco. 20% usually is enough. Again, be careful with the fimbrications because this is where you break the capsular bag. You never break it during the phaco. You break it only when you're doing IA. And then, of course, you can put your lens in. There's no hassle, there's no difficulty, and you can center it and put it in. We won't get into that anymore because it's a straightforward procedure. Let's take it again. Take one more. And here, of course, is a lens which is centered well. You have to be certain that you center perfectly. And one of the little tips which I may give at this point is, before you close off, inject air inside so it presses out the viscoelastic from behind. Now, this is a very hard brown cataract. You can't get it worse than this. Notice we have made vertical 5 cuts. And all I'm going to do is to impact in the middle and remove one piece, opening the door to a room. That one piece you have to open. Once you open that one piece, then everything just fragments and opens out. The little pieces can easily be assimilated and removed without much difficulty. Irrespective of how hard a cataract is, it just vanishes because you have already done the main problem, which is chopping it into little bits. And that is the one advantage which you have with flax. And frankly, as Partha Biswas had mentioned a little earlier, if it wasn't the cost, we'd use it on every single case. And of course, you can flip your lens in easily enough. There's absolutely no hassles and no difficulty. Fitting the lens with a flax is chicken feed. You just have to be sure you go below the capsular edge because the capsular edge is very often hidden by the edge of the pupil, which towards the end of the procedure tends to become a little small. Let's take one last cataract and see how we can show that to you again. Now, this is a cataract which is a soft intumescent type, but it was turning around. Now, sometimes these are very nasty cataracts. We think the hard ones are bad, these can be more worse. So you remember that when you do this procedure, you only use aspiration, no phaco energy at all. And be careful to remove the fimbrications, which I've shown you in the end. That fimbrication removal makes all the difference. And after that, you can just as easily center the lens and get away without any difficulty. There's really no problem. One big advantage is that the lenses, once you put them in, never slip out. So that's the big advantage you have with Flax. You have a rapidity in what you do. You can easily remove the procedures and it can give you, as one would say, reproducible results, irrespective of what type of lens it is. Thank you for the listening patiently.
Thanks, Dad, for those insights with 40 years of experience of doing cataract surgery behind it. Can you guys hear me? Harshul, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, yes, 40, we can. Yes, we can. Hi.
51 years of cataract surgery. I am 50 years old this year. Harshul, I don't think you're 50.
KK sir, good evening.
Yeah. Harshul, how are you?
Sir, fine, sir. Great
so,
talk,
I want to introduce Harshul, who is a very prominent cataract surgeon of India and does the toughest cataracts. He's always in Bobby Osher's course at ESCRS and ASCRS. And Harshul is going to be one of the stars of Indian ophthalmology in the future, if he's not already. He's on the way driving from Dehradun back home and has stopped on the side of the road, imagine, to be part of the course. So thanks very much, Harshul. And you're going to speak on posterior polar cataracts, which is a big bugbear for us. And even today, when I see a posterior polar cataract, I start sweating. I have to increase the air conditioning. So please go ahead and start.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saras. It's a great pleasure to be in your course along with KK sir. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, fine. So I'll be speaking on management of posterior polar cataracts. We all know that the true posterior polar cataracts, they are always a nightmare for any phacosurgeon because there is always a chance of the posterior capsule defect and a lot of complications can occur. So you need to be careful at each and every step. You need to plan them very meticulously. So it starts with the creation of capsular axis. So sizing of the capsular axis has to be not more than 5.25 or 5.5 millimeter because if there is a big PCR, if there is a big posterior capsule defect, you may need to put a 3-piece IOL in the sulcus and do optic capture for long-term stability. And for optic capture, you need to have a sizing not more than 5.25 or 5.5. In the true posterior polar cataract, we always try to avoid hydrodissection. So hydrodelineation, after you do some hydrodelineation and it's a nuclear grade 2-3 cataract, I go ahead and put some OVD and start phaco and try to eat up the nucleus as much as possible without causing any rotation or without torsional forces in the capsular bag. So our entire efforts are directed towards trying to open up the posterior, take out the central, the adhered part in the last. So that's where our focus is. So once I clear off this nucleus, so after that you loosen up the epinuclear sheet all around from the capsular bag. See, I'm avoiding to take off this central plaque at this stage because I want to loosen up it from all around before I flip this. So once you take this epinuclear plate here, and this is the last portion. Now see the central adhered part which is there, it has been taken off now. And once you take this off, I see that there is of course a posterior capsule defect is there. Now it depends, your management now depends on the size of the posterior capsule defect and of course vitreous if it's there or not. So as I can see that this is increasing in size sort of. So I feel that yes, of course, there will be vitreous here. So that always remember that you never withdraw your instruments in a knee-jerk reaction, because it can further exaggerate this posterior capsule defect which is there, and secondly, more vitreous can start prolapsing from this posterior capsule defect. So here I go from side put some viscoelastic, maintain anterior chamber, and this is all under topical anesthesia. And now you need to stain the vitreous to see it and to cut it completely from the anterior chamber. And for that, you can go ahead and do either limbal vitrectomy, bimanual limbal vitrectomy, or if you are proficient enough, you can go ahead and do pars plana anterior vitrectomy. So here I am doing anterior vitrectomy, so staining the vitreous and using bimanual approach and doing anterior vitrectomy from the anterior chamber. So remember that it has to be complete vitrectomy before you start taking off this cortical matter. So then I go ahead and stripping the cortical matter from capsular bag. So unless and until you finish off the vitrectomy, you can't take these cortical matter nicely. So here, so these are the, and you can clearly see a very big posterior capsule defect here, and I have entirely completed the cleaning of the capsular bag. Again, never come out suddenly, put OVD, maintain anterior chamber, and here you need to implant a 3-piece IOL in sulcus and do optic capture. So I'm go ahead and implant a 3-piece IOL. Remember to try to keep the leading haptic horizontal to the iris plane. So if leading haptic goes behind iris, and you dial the trailing haptic in the sulcus. So once you have put this IOL in sulcus, then is the time to do optic capture. So here comes the importance of sizing. So here you see, I go on one side and other side. So here the lens is sulcus, go on one side with the Kuglin hook, push it on the other side and capture it. So this capturing is very crucial for long-term stability of the IOL, and check on both the sides that yes, whether it has been captured properly or not. And again, do take off if any vitreous is there in anterior chamber, put some Miochol and hydro stitch once your case is done. And this is the post-operative photograph. You can see there is a big posterior capsule defect. IOL is in sulcus and it has been nicely captured for long-term stability of IOL. So this was the scenario when we have a big posterior capsule defect and we can't convert this defect into a posterior capsulorhexis. So here's another case, typical posterior polar cataract. Again, now see, this is the last piece which I have taken off, and you can see a posterior capsule defect there. But here see the fluid movements and currents, they are same because there is no vitreous. So if there is a PCR, it doesn't always mean that there is a vitreous. So here there is a posterior capsule defect which is small, but there is no vitreous in anterior chamber. I can see the fluid currents which are there normally. So I go ahead and without allowing my anterior chamber to collapse, I do bimanual irrigation aspiration without doing any vitrectomy. So you can see here in center there is a posterior capsule defect which is limited to central 2.53 millimeter, and the entire posterior capsule is dancing with the irrigation fluid. Now is the time to convert this defect into this tear into a posterior capsulorhexis. I go ahead and put OVD and use microforceps to convert it into a posterior capsulorhexis. So if you are able to convert a limited posterior capsule tear into a good capsulorhexis, posterior capsulorhexis, you can implant single piece IOL in the capsular bag, which should be the preferred IOL in these cases. So I put a IOL in the capsular bag here and put some Miocol, and this finishes the case. Now see next post-operative photograph. You can see this is the posterior capsule tear which was converted into posterior capsulorhexis, and this is the uh, anterior capsulorhexis margin, and IOL is nicely sitting in the capsular bag. How much time do I have, Dr. Cyrus? Okay, and this is again typical posterior polar cataract. I do some viscodissection, take off. So when this last sheet comes off, as you can see, there is a posterior capsule central opening which is there, defect is there. So I go ahead and do some anterior vitrectomy here and put IOL in the capsular bag again. So I think with this I finish my presentation, and thank you very much Dr. Cyrus for giving this wonderful opportunity. And any questions for me?
Yeah, you'll be leaving now, right? Because I think you have to keep driving, so you can't be here
Yeah.
for 1 hour sitting in by
Yeah.
the side of the road. So if anyone has any question, now is a good time. But I can tell you, looking at your presentations, that you're a real expert. And posterior polar, despite femtosecond laser cataract surgery or whatever it is always going to lead to some kind of posterior capsule rupture now and then, however great the surgeon and however many years of experience he has. So you handled it really well. And as long as you expect that you're going to have a posterior capsular rent, then it won't catch you unawares.
Yes. Yeah.
So this
True.
used to be my favorite topic to speak on just a while
Yeah.
ago.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Harshul, for
Thank you, Dr.
being
Cyrus.
here. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All the best. See you
Thank
soon
you.
in
Thank
person.
you. Thank you. Yeah.
So, hi everyone. Can you all hear me? So this is my presentation today. Subluxated lenses and loose zonules. Let's run through this and see what it throws up. The first patient was lying in a hotel by the pool, and a mango fell on the eye. Well, the patient put Ciplox for 3-4 days and realized it was getting worse. And on presentation, she had IOP of 50, clear cornea, mid-dilated pupil, and lens luxating into the AC, shutting the angle. So we had to reduce the pressure of the eye. You can't enter an eye with a 50 and 60 IOP. So you give mannitol, you give oral Diamox, you wait about an hour or two, and then you take up the case once the pressure has fallen to reasonable levels. Let's see how it goes. Now, this is basically a blunt trauma with 360 degrees zonulopathy. There's not like a 90 degrees loss of zonule or 180. So I would expect to be able to handle this with a CTR. Basically, you need to first make a small rhexis. You need 4.5-5 millimeter rhexis to proceed in a case like this, because you want a good rim of capsule so you can hold the whole lens bag up. You can see the entire human lens is luxating into the AC, and it's kind of tilting like this. So all over, there's a tilt. So you do the hydrodissection, you see the wave passing across. And remember that in pupil hooks, you get 5 hooks, not 4. And we don't want capsule hooks in this case. We want pupil hooks because they are much smaller and more manageable and easily available. So we put 5 pupil hooks, and in we go and do an emulsification of the nuclear material. You can see that the bag, once it's held by pupil hooks, it's kind of rock steady. So once the job is done, now the next step is to do an irrigation aspiration. And when you do an eye on a case like this, you have to be a little careful that you don't pull the capsular bag off the hook, because even though there are 5 hooks, if you manage to pull it off one hook, the bag will get a little destabilized in that region. And once it's not being held with counter traction with the hooks, peeling the cortex is going to be a tad more difficult than if the hooks were there. So let's pull this out. Now, next step is I use a tension ring from a company called Offtech. And it's a European company, and these come preloaded like this. It's not really expensive. and far better than the average PMMA tension ring that we get. So I'm going to inject this tension ring into the eye. It goes in one shot like this, doesn't require any maneuvering. The bag is absolutely stable. And I kept a 3-piece lens standby in case things didn't go well. But I was able to put the single-piece lens that the patient had chosen for the case. So I can center it, you can see, get the legs in, and center it very nicely in a stable bag IOL complex situation behind the iris, and put in some air, make sure the AC is perfect the next day. And this is the end of the case. Let's look at the next case. Now, this is a bit of a complicated situation. In a subluxated lens, when should we use a ring segment, or when should we use an ASIA anchor, which is a device which is becoming more and more popular? This was invented by Israeli surgeon Ehud Asia, who's a great inventor and was a student of Blumenthal. So let's see how this kind of situation goes. So let's have a look at this case. When do we use capsule hooks in subluxation? When do we use a ring segment, and when do we use ASIA anchor? So in a case like this is what femtosecond laser was meant for. Femtosecond laser was not meant for doing 6x6 cataracts in refractive IOLs. Femtosecond laser was meant to make our lives easier in sublux cases like this, where no amount of surgical technique is going to give you that perfect 5mm punched out capsular axis that we are seeing here. Look at that. That's absolutely beautiful. We can go inside, use sodium hyaluronate, and create space. I learned this technique on YouTube by watching Ike Ahmed's video. And if you want to see this technique done to perfection, go and see Ike's video. And put in capsular hooks in this case, not pupil hooks, because I wanted, this has a larger zone of subluxation. I wanted more support. This is a Ahmed segment, which we railroad out of the eye. It's very simple. You just connect the tenoprolene to the segment. You don't even have to tie a knot because it's double armed. And you get the ring segment in the eye after railroading the needle out of the eye in the standard procedure. And tie it tight, and then put in a capsular tension ring as well to support the entire lens. So this will go inside the eye and center very nicely. Now, what if you have a poor axis with a small rim of capsule? And point is, how did you manage to get that small rim of capsule in the first place? So femtosecond laser doesn't work every single time. When we were learning, we didn't set the machine properly, and instead of doing a perfect rhexis, it's kind of done cortical punctures. You can see that there's absolutely no rhexis. It looks like a rhexis, but it isn't. It's the rhexis that wasn't ever there. So while trying to do a manual rhexis, it's kind of run off to the periphery like this, and it's run off there, and I've managed to pull it back in, but I've realized that there's just not enough rim of capsule. So I mark 2 millimeters behind, and we take this ASIA anchor out and tenoprolene suture. You can use 9-0 straight needle as well, because 9-0 is a little better, but I had 10-0 with me that day. So anyway, I pass it through the fixation hole of the ASIA anchor. And so you have a suture tied to the end of the anchor. Now you simply railroad that straight needle out of the eye, which is a rather straightforward procedure. So we want the ASIA anchor to hold the rim of capsular axis. That is the very important thing that we need here, because this is not a hard cataract situation. This is a situation where we're just having the cortex pulled off like this. So now we're able to imbricate the anchor inside the capsule. And now what we are doing is, we are going through the sclera twice. So I don't believe in making flaps, etc. I can just bury the knot in the tunnel made by this needle, and that will do the job because it's tenoprolene. The knot is really tiny. And tenoprolene is a surprisingly strong suture. It takes a little effort to actually break it with your hands. Now, when you inject in an IOL, do it very gingerly and slowly on top of a repositor, so that when it springs open and goes inside the capsular bag, it doesn't tear the capsular bag, and doesn't dislodge the anchor. So you can see we have a perfect situation here, anchor in place and capsule. Now, can we use a single piece IOL or CTR? We've always been trained that you have to put a CTR or you have to put a ring segment, and post that, then you have to put a three-piece IOL. A three-piece IOL has been like a savior or a go-to for all of us. But a lot of three-piece IOLs today don't have multifocal optics, and maybe it's not the material that you want and things like that. And patient wants a single-piece IOL. In certain situations, they want an Acrisoft or they want some other lens. So can we use a single-piece IOL as a CTR? And the answer is that yes, we can. This was a technique I published in Archives of Ophthalmology way back in 2009-10 with a three-piece IOL and then modified it for single piece. So this is basically an ectopia lentis patient. Fill up that gap there with Viscoat, not because Alcon is paying me, but there's honestly no better viscoelastic to put in the anterior chamber at the beginning of surgery than Viscoat. It's absolutely the best. And there are Indian clones of Viscoat like Orocoat, etc. We do the same job. So I'm just saying Viscoat as a generic for sodium hyaluronate and chondroitin sulfate, but we get 2-3 from Indian companies which are doing the job. Care Group also has one which is really thick and viscous. So now you do a nice rhexis about 5.5 millimeters. And if the rhexis runs out, you had it, you cannot use this technique. And then you will have to go back to the ASIA anchor that we saw in the preceding video. However, here everything goes well and you can do a nice rhexis around. And this predates our femtosecond laser. Otherwise, I would have definitely used the Catalyst system and got a perfect rhexis dead center. Also remember, with a femtosecond laser, you cannot extend the rhexis under the iris. What you see is what you get. If your exposure of the lens is 4 millimeters, your rhexis will be 3 millimeters. And then, it kind of defeats the purpose because you'll have to manually extend it. So sometimes you always wonder, why did I take so many years to learn rhexis? This is the time that you actually need it. Hi, Tushya. I think you can see me there. And so now I suspend the lens up with the two hooks and start doing a phacoemulsification, a slow motion phaco. So this is not really a hard cataract course. This is basically a subluxated lens and difficult situations course. So this is not a hard cataract. Just go inside with the phaco tip and everything comes out. Peel the cortex off. And once the cortex has been peeled off, then go inside with the capsular tension ring and inject the CTR. So this predates once again our capsular tension ring from Ophtec. So this was the capsular tension ring that you have to load into the injector and then inject. So in it goes. It takes a little more jugglery than the Ophtec system. Now this is your single piece IOL, and I tie the tenoprolene suture nice and tight to the midpoint of the haptic, which corresponds to the center of the IOL. And now I pass the needle down the barrel of the IOL. And now we have a situation where the needle is attached to the IOL by the suture, and we can inject the IOL in and still maintain a 2.8 millimeter tunnel and not have to open the tunnel and put in a rigid IOL. So you don't need a PMMA IOL, just your foldable IOL do the job. Pass your nice long straight needle that comes a Prolene suture, which is more than 1.5 inches, nearly 2 inches long. So it goes straight out of the back of the eye like that, about 2.5 millimeters behind, and then just simply inject the IOL in. Once the IOL is injected inside the bag, it becomes a very stable situation because now that part of the subluxation of the bag is being supported by the haptic. And you can do this with most of the haptics. We prefer these Rayner pattern lenses because the haptic's really stiff and does the job of a Emmett segment. Now you can simply take out your hooks and adjust suture tension by passing the needle halfway through the sclera twice when you don't really need to make a flap and do anything like that. This will do the job. And now we tie this nice and tight and adjust suture tension. And this is the end of the case. So now I'd like to invite Tushya to give his talk. Tushya, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I want to invite Tushya. Tushya is a very prominent surgeon from North India, and he runs that fantastic meeting with his dad, Rohit Om Prakash, in Amritsar, which we had the pleasure to attend a few times, the North Indian IRSI. And he's an extremely skilled surgeon. He's got awards from ASCRS for his wonderful movies and that flap motility sign, which I love. And it's a great pleasure for me to invite Tushya, my younger colleague, to be part of this course. So Tushya, ball is in your court. Now you start.
Thank you so much, sir, for the opportunity and such kind words. So I'm just going to share my screen immediately. Is my screen shared, sir?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
You start.
So good afternoon, everybody. So I'll be talking today about protecting the cornea in rock-hard cataracts. Endothelial cell damage in rock-hard cataracts can be due to high ultrasound energy, prolonged phaco time, or direct contact by the rebounding nuclear fragments, or due to the turbulence of irrigating solutions, can be due to instruments or by IOLs. So this mechanical endothelial trauma, we have a lot of current concepts in the literature which minimize them, like the endocapsular or deeper plane phacoemulsification of totally separated small nuclear fragments, hypothermic perfusion, employment of fluidics to provide stable interior chamber maintainer, replenishing interior chamber with viscodispersive device, and use of femtosecond laser or a manual pre-chopping techniques. And there are a couple of modalities which are described in literature to decrease the ultrasound energy, like the direct phaco-chop, crater-in-chop, power modulations like torsional, variable pulse or burst modes, introduction of new phaco tips such as the balance tip with the decreased amplitude near the incision, pre-chopping, MyoLoop, flax. But if you are using MyoLoop, there's a little disadvantage in making these black cataract or rock hard cataracts into 6 to 8 pieces, which is quite difficult in MyoLoop. So other technological advancements, like I mentioned before, is the use of balance tip. So this paper by Dr. Sudarshan Khokar et al. Showed that the new balance tip, it showed significantly less CDE, total ultrasound time, torsional amplitude, aspiration time, and fluid usage, especially in the higher grades of cataract. Similarly, another study by Chen et al. Compared the femtosecond laser-assisted cataract surgery versus the conventional phacoemulsification, where flax for hard nuclear cataracts conserved phacoemulsification power, provided a significant reduction in corneal endothelial damage, and led to a faster visual rehabilitation. So this is a white cataract where we had done flax. I just wanted to show you, as we all know that you have incomplete tags, so you have to be very careful. Do it along the circular way, along the groove. So we had done the fragmentation, and you can see how they are partially, the fragmentation is so easy, which helps in usage of less CDE, thereby less endothelial cell damage. Coming to another case where we had done flax in a black cataract. If you can see here, just a pinch method, it removes the capsular excess so easily. Hydrodissection, we do it very gentle, a slow hydro. And then you can see how beautifully it has been fragmented into 6 pieces. We usually did a sculpt just to make a groove, did a modified chop, and you can see how easily it is getting separated without much of CDE. You can see the CDE at the end of the surgery, which is comparatively so less, which helps in protecting the cornea by reduction in the endothelial cell loss. So you can see here how perfectly they are divided. So flax is a nowadays with the new advancements, it is a perfect tool for protecting the endothelial damage and reducing this CDE. So you can see here how well they are getting separated. So in black cataracts and harder cataracts, we always make sure that we divide these into 6 pieces, and they should be adequately separated. Yes. So our strategies of preventing contact with the endothelial cells in black and white or black cataracts are that we have to make sure that the nuclear fragments are totally separated, because often the posterior plates are joined. So we have to separate them totally into very small fragments. 6 pieces to 8 pieces is very good. Then when you have to do phacoemulsification, always remember you have to do a deeper plane phacoemulsification, which has to be far away from the endothelium. Always remember to recoat your corneal endothelium with a visco dispersive. And of course, we have been using balance tip in all our hard cataracts, and wherever flax is possible, like I showed you in the videos, we can actually help in reducing the endothelial cell damage. So another thing which I want to emphasize here is we have come up with a new technique called the chopper shield technique, which I'll be showing you in the next video. So this is a case of black cataract, where we'll be demonstrating you a new technique called the chopper shield technique. So if you see here, the side port incision is made 60 to 80 degrees from the main port to facilitate apt positioning of the chopper. The parts of the chopper which form the junction of the shaft and the tip, along with their adjacent parts, are primarily used as shields by horizontal placement interior to the nuclear fragments. All the time, the surgeon focuses on emulsifying an interior spilling nuclear fragments. He uses the foot switch in a controlled way and shadows the nuclear fragments with the chopper by using chopper shaft, shaft tip junction, and tip length to his advantage to prevent nuclear fragments from bouncing towards corneal endothelium. Clear cornea is seen on postoperative day 1. So in this technique, we are using a thin chopper, which actually does not obscure the vision of the surgical field at any point of time. It is closely placed just above the phacotip and made sure that it is far away from the endothelium. And as we know that the chopper is used as a shield only when the division of the nucleus into 6 or 8 fragments is being done, because that actually debulks the bag. So you have a more space for working. Our technique, it is a very simple step which can be easily incorporated by surgeon without any fuss in his surgical technique. It has yielded very clear corneas in the immediate post-operative period and the endothelial cell loss of approximately 6% at the end of 1 month. So this simple technique, when we employ it along with the other modulations and other things which I've told you earlier, will make phacoemulsification in rock hard cataract very safe, and we can target pristine clear corneas on day 1. So this technique, we recently published it last month, which is to protect the corneal endothelium in hard cataracts in clinical ophthalmology. Thank you so much, Dr. Cyrus. Over to you.
Thanks, Tushya. So that's a really elegant technique to prevent the nuclear pieces jumping up and down. I wonder, we should have a chopper that opens like a chhatri with a flexible kind of contact lens material, and then you can use 100% phaco power, and none of it reaches the endothelium. I don't know why no one has thought of that yet. Dad had done something like this about 15 years ago, and he had called it HEMA endothelial shield, and he had put in a bandage contact lens and stuck it to the cornea with viscoelastic.
Okay.
But nobody really took that idea forwards, never went into production. Now with the thinner polyfilcon lenses and all, I'm wondering whether we should try that again. Because if you have a endothelial shield like that of very micro thin plastic material, well, your ultrasound energy will not hit the endothelium, and you can do phaco with 100% phaco power cataract will go away in 30 seconds, however hard it is, and zero endothelial loss. And then when it's done, you just hold it at the tunnel and throw it out. It looks like basically a DSEC scroll.
True, sir. That's
Yeah.
a very, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we should all try that and see how that goes. So, Dad, your next talk is ready?
Yep.
Yeah, start.
Okay.
Tushar sir is joining at 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. We'll be here. All right.
Now when once in a while you break the capsule, how do you get away? There are ways of managing and ways of handling. 1 second, I'll just get out of this for a moment.
Dad, you'll have to share screen because we can't see your
Sorry.
presentation at all.
Sorry.
So just do a share screen again.
Okay. Okay.
Is it coming up?
It's come up. 1 second, I'll
Okay.
just share screen.
Just do a share screen.
Don't yet.
Yeah. It's at the button at the bottom here.
Yeah.
The green button which says share screen.
Yeah, I've done that. Share.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Yeah, just bring the video all the way back. Yeah, perfect.
Now I'm going to talk to you about something which we've been doing for a period of time, which I've now reactivated, which is basically what we call as the HEMA lifeboat. When you break a capsule and you have fragments, the question is how you get out of it. This is a very simple, easy way of handling it. All you need to do is you take the fragments and you put it in. There's no financial implication. It's a brilliant, simple system. Here we are operating, we're going fine, and we break the capsule at the lower part. And as luck would have it, you have vitreous coming out, which you can see being excised here. Now, at this point, you are in solid trouble because you've got a large amounts of a hard brown cataract sitting there, and you are now going to be in difficulty. This is a very simple way of doing it. You utilize a 9.5 millimeter contact lens plus 5 diopter. The plus 5 diopter gives it thickness. You punch out this thing from a regular contact lens, a disposable contact lens. You put it into a small little folder, as you can see here. Press it into place. Any folder, any injector folder will do. This is the care group folder, so literally anything works. Just remember the edges of the lens you have to fold over like your hands, and then you inject it in. Now the secret is to inject it at the side, not in the middle. As you notice here, we are now moving the fragments away from the place, and we're going to inject it along the side here. As you inject it, the lens will come there, and what we now need to do is simply open the lens and stack the fragments like people sitting in a lifeboat. Just turn the fragments over, and at the same time, using the repositor, go on sweeping the lens in. A 9.5 millimeter lens will sit absolutely stuck. No fragment will go behind. Unlike other techniques where you can use a lens to do that, where from the edges your fragment may still slip in. Here, nothing slips. As you can notice on top, the edge of the lens is clearly visible on both sides. You can now do your phacoemulsification over it, a slow motion phaco. And at the end of the procedure, all you need to do essentially is to remove the lens. See the edge of the lens sitting here at the side. A standard lens, but use a +5 because that gives it a certain level of stiffness. All you now need to do is just take it out, and then you do a visco dissection for the residual cortical material which is left over, because all your hard pieces are now gone. Nothing is now going to fall in. And this is your lens just to show you on the cornea as to what it looks like. As I said, a 9.5 millimeter Trifine, you use it to punch the lens and keep them. Autoclave it and keep it. There's no problem. And just a quick short animation to show it. This is the lens which you want. It's basically a HEMA concave lens that you can utilize. And you feed it into the injector, which you can do. And as I mentioned earlier, the edge, put it in the middle and fold the edges over. That is important. If you don't do that, it snags and tears. So put it in the middle and then fold the edges over, like your hands folding over your chest. And then gradually close your bag, making sure that the edges of the lens go on folding themselves over. And then you put in an injector and inject it. But again, the important thing is when you inject, be sure to inject on one side. One side, very important. Fragments are there, inject on one side. Use the edge of your repositor to hold the edge in, and with the other hand, we're using a repositor, you just get your fragments to come on the surface. A 9.5 millimeter lens fits snugly, and then you phaco over it, you just remove the fragments. None of the fragments are going to go anywhere. The lens will not move, nothing will happen. It just sits peacefully. And at the end of it, all you do is you hold it, take it out and throw it away. A very cheap, simple device. It costs you what, 70 rupees a lens. That is all. It's a ready-made lens which comes. You have to take it out, you punch it and you put it into a bottle and autoclave it. Once you remove the lens, that's the end of it all. Just hold it and take it out. So this is a simple way of doing it, just to show you quickly once again. We follow the lifeboat, as one will say, once more to the rescue. So you have a fragments which are broken again. Here, once again, a problem tended to occur. And you got your vitreous, you notice the vitreous is oozing out here. And you know that at this moment, you try anything funny, you put your phaco inside, your fragments are going to sit on the retina, making your retina friend very happy because you've given him a nice patient. Important thing is inject it along the side. As you open it with one, put your repositor into this little funnel which has been made, as one would say, of the lens. And with the other hand, get your lens fragments to go over it. Okay, that's as simple as that. Really nothing much to be done. And then you do your phacoemulsification over the surface. Remember to take a +5.5 diopter lens. That's the one which works the best. And then you can remove the final fragments. In the end, you can just remove it with really no hassles and no difficulties. So this is a method which works very well. It's a very simple device. And I mean, it's a lifesaver. It's lying with you there. It costs you nothing and saves you a great deal of trouble. Once it is done, you can then do a visco dissection, and this shows you the lens sitting onto the cornea again. And you can just do a visco dissection, and that is the end of the whole affair with no risk. You have only cortex left over, which is not difficult to remove. And then you can place your, since you have not played with the vitreal face, which is broken at all, the edges of your rexes will still be available for you to place a lens over the edge. Inject over a repositor so that the lens is supported. Let it go into the edges, anterior edges of the fornices, where it lies anterior to the anterior capsule. And that is the end of the procedure. The simple procedure works very well. Something which I think you should always keep with you. There's no problem at all. You got time, Cyrus, still? Or
yeah, next we've got Gaurav who's waiting because he has to go to another course. So Gaurav speaking now.
Gaurav, please take over.
So here's my chance to introduce Gaurav, and he's a very dynamic surgeon from Dehradun. And if you don't know who Gaurav Luthra is in India, means either you've not been practicing ophthalmology very long, otherwise you've come from some other planet. So Gaurav has got a lot of work behind him. He speaks on biometry with Warren Hill. He's an international star of APAS, CRS as well. And his courses always do very well wherever he is. So Gaurav, please enlighten us with your presentation, and please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Cyrus, for that introduction. Most importantly, I'm your friend, and I think that's what matters the most for me. Thank you so much for inviting me for the course, and it's really a privilege to be with you. There is a lack of my pointer. I'm not able to switch this. I'm so sorry. There's something funny. Okay, found it. Yeah, so I'd lost the, okay, so I'm sharing screen now. So Cyrus, for some reason, the course was, I knew I was on the course, but it wasn't showing up in my agenda, and I had to put together a thing quickly. And I have a few videos which I wanted to share. You wanted me to speak on pupil devices and when to use hooks. So I thought I'll start off by showing one of the indigenous, rings, which you use all the most expensive rings which cost more than 10,000. I use something which costs 1,000 rupees, because in Dehradun we can't afford such expensive devices as you end up using in Bombay so freely. So this is the poor man's ring. So my dear friend Suvain has designed this, the BHEX. I'm sorry about that overlay, which is so irritating from the Virion, and while you are operating you don't care much for it, but in the post-op videos you end up seeing it as a big interference. So these rings are very easy to insert. There are two ways to do it. You can use a forceps which comes with the ring now, and I somehow still prefer to use my hooks and the Y-tip manipulator, because it still is easy for me to use. However, in certain situations when this does not work as well, there is definitely more control, just like there is more control with the capsular rhexis forceps and the micro rhexis forceps when you want to be in a tight situation. So if you have a very rigid pupil or a pupil where the ring is not engaging in the first go, I will then switch to fixing it with the forceps. So it works really well, but it does not work in very, very small pupils. I have used the Malugins ring a lot before this for many years, and that can actually get into even smaller pupils. But for what Dr. Suvin Bhattacharya recommends is that for the very small and tight pupils, you might want to do a stretch first and then fix his ring. Otherwise it won't fix that easily, and it may come off, and it may even go under the iris. But it's a beautiful ring. It goes in from a very, very small incision. It's quite reasonably priced, and you can actually keep a stock of these rings for the difficult day, and makes life very easy, and has been I've used it in lots of cases now, and it works well. It can even be used with the femtosecond laser, because it requires only a very small paracentesis incision to insert the ring. And with that you can actually put the ring and then explant it, and then go and do these put it for the femto part of the procedure, and then come back and finish the surgery. So removing it is also pretty easy. You can see here, of course, that it tends to sometimes go under the iris, and you have to be careful. It can even catch sometimes the iris over there if it's having a sharp edge over there, and then just pull it out. It comes out very easily. You don't need any special devices or anchors. But reusing it can be a little tricky, because sometimes when you tend to reuse it, if you ETO it, it will just break. It's very friable, so I would not recommend that. Now, this is my favorite ring. I've been using this for maybe more than 10 years, and I'm sure Cyrus and Keki sir have been using it as well. It's beautiful to use. I remember seeing very beautiful videos of Dr. Keki sir using the Malugins ring, and Boris is a dear friend. He's really changed the life of the small pupil phacosurgeons, and this can be implanted very easily and engaged very easily. Let me run you through this. And once that is done, you can actually becomes very, very easy to go through with the surgery. Now, removing it is the other part, which is very, very important to know. You disengage it from all the four sides, and then you have the injector with which you can engage it. And while you pull it back, you will have to press it here. If you don't do that, then it will get stuck there and it won't come out. So you have to gently ease it over there. Those two scrolls have to go one on top of each other, and it comes out well. Now, sometimes you'll have a complication. This was one of my cases where I had a situation where after I did the rhexis, and then I wanted to proceed with the surgery, it became a small pupil. This is more than a 10-15-year-old video, but here we got stuck with the Malugins ring because it caught on to the rhexis. So as we try to put this, so be very, very careful if you put it after the rhexis has been made. Sometimes it will catch on to the rhexis and you will be in a situation it can break the rhexis. So I then, this is the indication for using the hooks, because in such shallow pupils where already the rhexis is there, the view of the rhexis is not good at all because the pupil has come down over it. You will end up causing complications. I was lucky here, I got away. The rhexis did not break, but something else happened. As we tried to implant the lens, the optic size of the lens was, this was a Zeiss lens, Cyrus, if you remember. The optic was bigger and I was doing a wound assisted injection. The lens opened above the Malugins ring and the size of the optic was bigger than the Malugins ring. So there was no way that it's going to go through. I kept struggling for a long time, but obviously it wouldn't have gone through. This is all in retrospect that I understood that why it wasn't going through. I was thinking that these lenses go through a rhexis so easily, why it won't go through the Malugins ring, but it doesn't. And eventually, we had to explant the lens, we had to explant the Malugins ring, and there was a back dehiscence. So it was like a disaster case, but we ended up managing this by putting in a ACIOL. If I remember, this lady still comes to me after 15 years and she's so scared she hasn't got the second eye done even till now, because I took 45 minutes to do this case for her. And I'll finish off by showing you one Hooks case, where this case was referred to me by one of my colleagues. She started a surgery for an intumescent cataract. The pupil came down. She tried to convert to a can opener, and then the pupil became so small she abandoned it and put an air bubble. So now I was stuck with this funny situation. I went in and stained the capsule for whatever was left of it. And here is an indication for using the Iris hooks, because you don't know what's behind. So unless you're confident that you know what's right behind it, you should not attempt to put in these rings. Now, this was a tight situation because there was this lens which was really sticky. 2 days post-op, it had become very, very sticky to the capsule. The nucleus was very difficult to tackle there, and I had to bring out the nucleus in a very, very gradual way, and we were lucky that we got away. And then, of course, the cortex again can be very, very sticky. Now this went on and I was able to implant the lens. I wanted to put in a 3-piece. The 3-piece flipped inside. And sometimes, everything goes wrong when you don't want it to go wrong, but this is what happened and caused a hyphema. So I had to deal with another complication here. Nothing to do with Cyrus's course, but this is how life is. When you're in a situation, everybody will probably want to take advantage of where you are. So in the end, if you're persistent and, work hard with it, you can manage these, and we were able to get through this. Thank you so much, Cyrus. I'm sorry that I'll have to rush to the next course. Keki sir, it's been a pleasure to be with you and Cyrus. And any questions, I'll be happy to answer quickly.
Thanks, Gaurav. How have you removed your spectacle number?
You can understand, I'm presbyopic now, so I'm enjoying my near vision. I'm slightly myopic, so.
So you might have put in trifocals.
Sure. So Cyrus is the fifth guy now, and Baki sab. See, you're putting me in the spot now, right?
Yeah. So anyway, thanks very much, Gaurav. Thank you. We won't hold you, and let's go to the next speaker. Thanks so much, Gaurav, for being with us.
Gaurav,
we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Tushya, are you ready?
Yeah, Dr. Rohit is there. So he's gonna...
Yes.
He's there.
So, Dr. Rohit, are you ready with your talk, sir?
Yes, let me unmute.
Yeah. So, hello, sir. It's a great pleasure. Yeah. And Dad and I welcome you to our course. And you're going to be speaking on subluxated cataracts from what I gather. Yeah. And please go ahead, sir. And we hope to see you soon at your meeting in Amritsar.
Hopefully, yes. Let's see.
Yes.
Thanks, Dr. Cyrus, for this opportunity. So I would be talking about subluxated cataracts. So this is a patient wherein you can find that the zonular dehiscence is more than 180 degrees. So in this patient, what I'm going to do is, let's see how I start. So what is going to be the site of incision? The site of incision has to be away from this area. So the next step should be, which should have been, I should have stained with triamcinolone and seen whether any vitreous was there, but I did not do, but that should be borne in mind. The capsular axis should be initiated farthest away from this point, and the nick should be not against the direction of the zonular dehiscence, but it should be towards that, so that there should not be any more zonular dehiscence. So let's start now and try to complete the rhexis. And the rhexis I could continue, and since I was moving in this direction parallel wherein the zonules were intact, so the moment I shifted here, I thought that I should add some support, which should be in the form of capsular hooks. because these capsular hooks provide anterior-posterior support right up to the equator, and they act as artificial zonules. Once that was done with the zonular support, artificial zonular support, I could complete the rhexis. Once the capsule rhexis was achieved, I put in one more capsular hook to give further support to the bag which was deficient in the zonules. The hydrodissection was away, and since away from the adjacent area, and once that was done, I thought that I'll use the capsular tension ring. This capsular tension ring, I am trying to start with from the area wherein there is a capsular support, wherein there is a zonular support. So in those patients wherein the zonular support is less, you could have started from the area of zonular dehiscence. But in those patients where the zonular dehiscence is more, you should start ideally from, I should have started from this area, but I started from this nevertheless. With CTR in place and capsular hooks in place, I started with the nuclear emulsification. As you can see, I divided it. I did cross chopping here so that I should debulk to some extent, and so that I should be able to facilitate the rotation of the nucleus. So once I took out a small part, then I started with the process of rotating. The rotation was possible because the capsular hooks provided counter traction by acting, by giving, by not allowing, by providing the counter traction. So once the rotation was started, I made small pieces and continued with the process. And eventually, within no time, with slow motion phaco, with IOP not more than 40, I completed the nuclear emulsification. At this point of time, I could have done one thing more. I could use this hard nuclear fragments to have acted as a nuclear scaffold, but this video is much before the concept of using an internal indigenous support in the form of a nuclear fragment for providing a three-dimensional support. Well, this was in the pre-nuclear scaffold area. So I continued with the nuclear emulsification, slow motion. At this point, somehow the IOP was increased, not my being aware of it. This is the last part in which of the cortical cleanup, the tangential stripping of the cortical matter is being done, as you can see. So because the CTR doesn't help, it impedes with the removal of the cortical lamella. You can see how I'm going around. I'm doing it. And with the tangential stripping here, I could do it easily. The vacuum, I'm trying not to use much. No doubt it is at the max is around 500, but I'm using it diligently. I would talk about the CTS in the next one. This is the one which also has 180-degree subluxation. In this, the site of incision is the same. Rhexis started from the area which is away from the area of zonular dehiscence. I did trypan staining, and I'm going to center the bag, not the pupil in that patient. So in those patients, we have to center the bag rather than centering the pupil. Capsular hooks are coming into place. As you can see, the capsular hooks are coming into place. I am a strong supporter of using capsular hooks because I feel they go right up to the equator and provide an anterior-posterior support. The incision was enlarged after that, and emulsification was started. Here I would show you in this hard nucleus how I used the hard nuclear fragments as a nuclear scaffold in patients with zonular dehiscence. So I'm doing chopping at this point of time, and I'm continuing with that. And you will find now what I have done is I will reposition the nuclear fragments. You can see how I have repositioned the nuclear fragment so that it is giving a further support to the bag. And this helps to some extent in delaying the insertion of a CTR in patient wherein you can use hard nuclear fragment as a nuclear scaffold. So now comes the CTR. Now I am going to, since the zonular dehiscence was more, I am going in from the area of maximum, what zonular stability. Now I'm using this spatula to give further support. Now the CTS will be used to provide to fixate the bag to the sclera, and the CTS comes in, as you can see. And once the CTS comes in, it will help. Because of the paucity of time, I'll just fast forward it. And I usually use a 3-piece intraocular lens in these situations. And once it is in place, you will find that the bag and the intraocular lens is very much at the right place. So bag fixation is another one which I'll be taking up. So this is a patient who had a trauma history. UBM showed that the zonules were intact in 1/2. So this is a patient wherein there is a bag subluxation in 180 degree. So I am enlarging the pupil by using iris hooks in this patient. So I used 5 iris hooks in this patient, and you can see now I'm using a trocar. So this trocar really helps in in placing the needle inside, because there is no chance whatsoever of the corneal tissue getting entangled and creating a messy situation. Now, once that was done, I'm now going from behind, and I've been able to pierce the bag and near the haptic, and how easily you can see I'm able to railroad it inside. Once it has been railroaded, this trocar has really helped in ease up my management of patients wherein you want to do. You can see now again, this is my non-dominant hand, and how easily I'm able to do it, because this trocar can manipulate 20 to 25 to 30 degree also without any issue. So you can see now it's an unedited how easily it is going in. And with this, you will find now I'm going to suture it, and the bag comes back to its place. You can see how the bag is perfectly centered now. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thanks very much, sir, for coming and sharing your valuable time with us today. Thanks, Tushya. And now we'll go over to Dad again. Dad, you have one more video?
Yeah, I'm going to show you.
So this is the last talk because we have 5 minutes to go.
I'm going to show you a new way of suturing your lens inside, where you don't have to create anything at all. One second, let me share the screen. Okay, you can see my screen now.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes, we can start.
This is known as transiridial suturing. It is something which is so fundamentally simple. I've always wondered as to why more people haven't done it. We have talked about making scleral flaps and implanting it under the flaps and closing the flaps and sticking the flaps and pulling edges of the implant out, etc., etc. But let me show you a method which really makes life simple. This is transiridial. The lens is going to be sutured in this place through an opening, through the iris, through the sclera corneal junction, and the suture buried in the track over here, with the result that no suture will be visible at all. Next day, eye is quiet, no question of making any flaps, no redness, no blurring, no nothing. This is exactly how it works, and this is how the lens sits in its place. Having seen that, now we take it down to the procedure. Now here we are doing a secondary implant. I've removed the cataract. Unfortunately, I've broken the face, so I can't do much about it. And all I do is I just open the conjunctiva a little on both sides. ज़्यादा नहीं खोलने का, थोड़ा खोलो. And then the next step which you do is to make a small little cut in the sclera cornea zone. I use a diamond knife which gives me a cut of 0.4 millimeter in thickness, but basically anything works. 0.4 is roughly the edge of an ordinary Bart Parker knife, so that is fine. All you do is you cut in the sclerocorneal junction, one opening which is roughly about 2 millimeters in size. Just hold it and cut it down. So you got a little cut on both sides of the sclera, nothing else. Now take your needle, go through the iris and railroad it out the other side. For the railroad, you only use a 26 gauge needle, again through the same opening that you have made. Since you have cut halfway through the sclera already, making an opening in the rest of the sclera is chicken feed. You don't have to push it, tug it, pull it, do anything. You railroad out the needle. Looking at Dr. Om Prakash's method, I'm wondering as to whether I should also try that, of putting in a little unit at the side, makes it a little easier. But whatever it is, you take it out and then you pull out your suture, which you can see on the line over here, and you put your lens and suture your lens onto it. This is the opening which I had originally made when I broke the capsule. So I pull it out and I suture the lens, each of the legs onto the edge of the lens. This is a standard Rayner lens which I'm putting it, but any lens which you utilize will do equally well. Suture it on both sides. There's no problem, no difficulty. All these lenses work equally well. Now, if you are utilizing any of the foldable lenses, please don't open up the incision more than 5 millimeters, because all these lenses peacefully can be squeezed through a 5 millimeter incision. All you need to do is you hold it at the side, put it there, and then just gently squeeze on the lens and it goes in. Doesn't look great, but it works great. So what do? You can open it slightly a little more, because this was a 2.8 millimeter incision, and you open it a little and you squeeze it. Now see, this is smaller than the incision, but you just gently squeeze it. The lenses will flex itself and go in without too much of a difficulty. Pull out the needle on both sides so that the suture is tended to pull out. So far, everything is standard. Interesting part is now, how do you place your sutures? This is something which you need to observe carefully, because it took me quite a bit of time before I finally worked out how best to do this procedure. All you need to do is you take the needle and move it along the length of the opening that you have made. Just hold the needle and take it along the length of the opening. When you take it through the length of the opening and take it out, you are left with two openings. You're left with one loop and one single strand. All you do is suture it together. This is 10-0. So, there's absolutely no hassles about it. Just suture it into the depths of the incision that you have made. And then you just trim the edges. This sinks into the depth of the incision, there's no problem. Similar, look carefully. Incision, go into the depth and along the length of the incision, open it up. So the needle really goes along the length of the incision. Adjust your suture so that your lens is well centered, and tie your knot. The one side you got a double loop, one side you have a single strand. You don't have to do gymnastics, you don't have to do anything. Kuch karne ki zarurat nahi hai. And then we just simply cut off the edges. Now the next step which you do is bury it. The easiest way to bury it is use the edge of a forceps, or use the edge of the suturing instrument, whatever it is, and just bury it in. It goes into the depth of the incision and stays there. You don't need to close the flaps, no gum, no glue, no nothing. As I said, just move it along the edge, just pull the edges of the flap inwards, and the next day your eye is absolutely crystal quiet. There's literally, it looks totally untouched, and you got the lens sitting there, no suture, nothing to lose. So this is a very simple, straightforward method which you can do suturing with no difficulty at all. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you'll try it next time when you have an opportunity of doing a secondary implant.
So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, Dushya. I don't know if you're there. Oh,
Thank
there
you so
are.
much, sir. We learned.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And thank Dad as well. And okay, Dad, I think we have to wind up now. Our time is over. And I think we should meet in person now soon. And we are fed up of this COVID nonsense now.
Yeah, you can't even drink here.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Okay,
it's,
Ji,
Yeah.
stay home.
it's
Nice
Thanks.
to see you again, yeah.
yeah, it's great to see you, sir.
Ah,
And Dr.
Thank you all.
hopefully we'll meet in
So-
Amritsar again.
Dr. Cyrus, your new avatar is absolutely great.
Yeah.
It's better than the old one.
It's such a big motivation for all of us, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep seeing
And
your
don't worry,
posts,
Tushar.
sir.
You'll also look like this when you're 50. Yeah.
Thank you
So
so
Raj,
much,
I think we are out of time now, and we are
Okay.
going to wind up.
Yes, sir.
So bye everyone.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
And how many people finally? So we had how many people? 180, you said.
145 were there in the start of the session. And
Okay.
like after this session, like you have to connect to the AV team and they'll let you know the full details.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, 145 is also not bad.
Yeah,
We'll take
good.
it.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Right. See you all.
Hello,
Thank
bye-bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you everyone
Bye.
for such an informative session.
See
By
ya.
this, we conclude this session.